So where we're at in the timeline is we're still under Section 2, the Republic of Rome, and then we have started Part 3, the Republic Wars of Conquest. That's what we're starting right now. And we're in Chapter 1, the Syrian War. Now, if you recall, we've just ended Part 2, the Republic Wars of Defense, and the last war was the Second Macedonian War. And Rome's terms with Philip were not unduly severe, but war was already looming with Antiochus III, also known as Antiochus the Great, which was Philip's eastern ally. I've already explained what the Republic Wars of Defense meant to the historians, and now for the Republic Wars of Conquest, the logic of this was that Roman military expansion is pretty clear, because for the sake of security and trade, Rome wanted peace in the Eastern Mediterranean. But since she could not countenance any power strong enough to act as a peacemaker, she had to exert her own strength in this capacity. So that's basically where we transition from the wars of defense to the wars of conquest. Now, Antiochus, he is from the old Alexander successor empires. Remember, the entire East basically are Greek empires that succeeded Alexander, and they've been warring with each other. Now, Antiochus, he employed the exiled Hannibal in a military capacity. And this shows to me that Antiochus neglected Roman power. He should have at least suspected the fact that Rome just conquered Hannibal and defeated Carthage, and Hannibal was not the same commander he was in his younger years. So Antiochus, I think, starts out not really understanding the Romans. And then for his own grandiose self-image, he has been conquering eastern territories. He's been building back up the Seleucid Empire. He's taken back all the Persian territory up to India. He's taken back Syria. And at this point, he is now looking to take advantage of the Ptolemaic dynasty squabble going on down in Egypt. And he's now going to take over Egyptian possessions up here in the Anatolia area. So in this endeavor, he wants King Eumenius of Pergama to ally with him and take over all of Anatolia. Well, King Eumenius says, no, we don't want to do that, and they ask for Rome's help. Now, at the same time, the real spark was happening in Greece. You had Aetolia League fighting the Thessalonian League here in central Greece. And Aetolia, knowing that Antiochus and his ambitions, and he was heading into the Anatolia area and heading toward Greece, he asked Antiochus for help. So now you have these alliances going on, which brings Rome back into Greek affairs. Macedonia, Philip V, who had been allied with Antiochus, he decides at this point that he's not going to go with Antiochus. He's actually going to ally with Rome. I think Philip acted in his own self-preservation and decided to join the winning side, which was a very wise move. And then also Rhodes, with the fleet power, they allied themselves with the Romans. So it was Rome, Macedon, Rhodes, and Pergama against Antiochus and some Greek allies. And we can hail this as the Alexandrian old empire against the new Roman Empire, to see who was going to be the power now in the Eastern Mediterranean. Remember, the Romans have pretty much control of all the West. Now we're going to see who controls the Eastern Mediterranean. Now, Antiochus marches through the Ptolemy territories in southern Anatolia, and he goes to Ephesus. It is here that Rome sent delegates to tell Antiochus to leave Pergama and Greece alone. Antiochus basically said, mind your own business, these are Greek affairs and they don't concern you. But as we know, Rome has already invested manpower, money, and Roman lives, so they were politically involved whether Antiochus liked it or not. Antiochus then launches a landing from Ephesus to Demetrius, and he conquered Thessaly there. Remember, he was helping the Aetolian League. And then he captured Athens. Now, Philip V, he came in and started attacking in Thessaly. Rome reacted swiftly. They landed an army in their territories in Epirus, and they outmaneuvered Antiochus. So while Philip was attacking in Thessaly, the Romans were maneuvering toward Antiochus, and they were looking to cut him off. So Antiochus had no choice but to retreat back to the strategic position of Thermopylae. Now here's a shot of Thermopylae, and this section right here is the pass, and armies would move along the coast with the fleets protecting them, and it's a plain field, and it's the quickest route, so they would travel along the coast to go from here, to get from here over to Thrace and then into Asia, instead of marching where the mountains were to the west of them, or if you tried to go in the plains even farther west, you know, it was hard to protect supply lines, and you would be surrounded on all sides by enemies or potential enemies. So it was always easiest to travel right through here. That's why the strategic position of Thermopylae was important. And what I wanted to show you here was, in the present day, the Malayan Gulf is out here where this black line is. This is where it is today. And then I'm just going to show you this shot here, a picture I took of it. I'm standing on Colonos Hill and looking out, and that's where the Malayan Gulf is. It's hard for you to see it, that's why I drew the line, but all that is used to be covered with water from where I'm standing pretty much to where it is today. Now we'll go back to another shot on the Gulf, where the famous battle that y'all know about between the Spartans and the Persians, the water line was right here. This was in 480 BC. And then I'll show you a picture here of a pass I took of the pass where I'm looking at Colonos Hill. I'm looking down. You see the line right here? That's how narrow this would have been in Persia's day. Now back on this map, this is where it is, where we figure it is in about 190 BC with the Romans. So it's a little bit wider, but it's still narrow. And let's go back on this pass here, and my shot here, and that's where I have the red line. That's about how much wider it would be. And you can see on this map, you have the Phoenicians' walls, you have the hot springs. This is the area where the Persians put up their stand, and the area where the Syrians would be putting up their stand, because it's the narrowest. So just another shot here. This is from an aerial shot, and you can see this little X right here. That's Colonos Hill. That's where I was standing, and you can see the Malayan Gulf is way out there. You see where I drew this black line? It says 480. This is how narrow the pass was with the Persians. Now here is where 190 BC, this is how this pass would be. So you'd have these hills on this side, the water on this side. The Syrians are putting up a stand right here. Now I'm going to move to showing you a shot right down the pass from Colonos Hill. And Colonos Hills, if you don't know, that's where the supposedly Spartans made their last stand. So now that you have the overall picture, let me set up the battlefield, what was happening with the Syrians and the Romans. You see, now I'm standing on Colonos Hill and I'm looking down the pass. You see the black line here? This is where the Persians would have fought. So now you see the red line here. This is about how farther out it was, okay? But the pass is pretty narrow. The Syrians put up their defense. They first put up where the Phoenician wall, they called it was a wall that was built up, and then the Persians built it up, and then armies just keep rebuilding it after it gets kind of knocked down. So they have this defense here, and the Syrians kept their peltasts, their light infantry and missile throwers behind there, why the Romans would try to attack that. Now, farther back, they would have ramparts set up where the main Syrian army was. And then these two spots that I circled here in the purple, these are posts that the Syrians would set up. They'd set up a couple posts in the back to protect the flanks in case the Romans did try to outflank them and come around the hills, because they knew it was possible. And this red line on the left, that's where the mountain we're talking about, where the Romans will be trying to come around, and they'll come out in between the two mountains down the slope, in the slope area there. Now here, 40,000 legionnaires under Manius Calabrio and Marcus Cato the Elder, they attacked Antiochus, who held a strong position in the pass. And in the meantime, you know, the Romans were sending a couple detachments around the hill trying to find their way around. But the Romans did assault. Antiochus repulsed it. But by then, the Romans did manage to work their way around the hill, and they struck hard at a post which was held by 2,000 Aetolians, and they captured it. And this exposed the main Syrian force, which was in that defensive position. And now a battle was ensuing that represented the Greek-Persian fight 200 years earlier. 18,000 Romans were assaulting the Syrian force, but the Romans found they were enfiladed by Seleucid missiles. Now, enfiladed means they have a direct line of fire right down a path where arrows are going to just rip through the entire Roman line, you know, from the side. Now, most armies, you know, would start running and retreating, but the disciplined Romans, man, they just pressed the assault harder. And the Syrian light infantry that were behind their defensive position were forced to behind the ramparts where the main Syrian army were. And the Romans were assaulting that, but they were halted once again. They were halted on several, they were stopped on several assaults here. But now another 2,000 Roman detachment had struck hard at another Italian post which was protecting the hill approaches. This was Cato's force. He was dispatched at the same time, as the other detachment, but he got lost in the dark going in the hills. However, he emerged to find this post only held by 600 Aetolian guards. And the Aetolian guards were easily overran, and they run back to the Syrian camp. You see, I put this little castle in the back, like their camp is back there. Now Cato, he doesn't go after the rear of the main Syrian force that is holding off the main Roman force. What he does is he goes to the camp and he takes the Syrian camp. And when the main Syrian force saw that their camp was taken, they panicked. See, they're not disciplined like the Romans were. They panicked and they ran. So Antiochus, with his aide Hannibal, were forced to re-embark back to Asia with only 500 men left out of this force. Now, according to the numbers, Antiochus had about 12,500 men, and they did have war elephants there. And the Romans had 25 to 30,000. Antiochus lost 12,000 men here. Like I said, only 500 got away. And this battle was over in 24 hours. As Antiochus was fleeing, he wanted to prevent the Romans from crossing over to Asia, so he ordered his fleet and his naval commander, Polyxenidas, and take their approximately anywhere from 150 to 200 warships. Now about this map, just so you don't get confused, because I usually put the Romans in red, but on this map, all the blue is the Roman movements and all the red is the Syrians. And you can see they met right there in the middle at Corsica. That was one of the first major naval engagements between the two. Now back to how many ships the Syrians had. But he only had probably, a lot of them were smaller and merchant ships, but they were capable of fighting in warships. But he took them and he sailed to block the Romans and their allies, the Gaumans and the Rhodians, before they can all unite out here at the Battle of Corsica. He attempted to hit the Roman fleet. Now the Romans had about 150 ships, so it was a pretty big naval battle, and the Romans had 81 quinqueremes, which were big ships capable of carrying a lot of heavy Roman infantry. And once the maneuvering took place and the Romans were able to close ranks, the heavy infantry quickly and their grappling tactics quickly overtook the Syrian force. Now, Polynices, he kind of, I would say, did a wise move, and after losing 23 ships to the heavy Roman infantry, and his men were no match, the light infantry were no match for the Romans, he quickly sailed back to port at Ephesus, and the Romans' fleet blockaded them there, and this now allowed the Romans a chance to now cross the Hellespont and go into Asia. So far we have 2 Roman victories in this Syrian war. Even though the Romans had offered battle the next day after this, Polynices was wise not to take that bait. He stayed in port. They built up their ships and went back at it the following year. And Antiochus' plan was he wanted to split up the Roman allied fleet. So he sent Hannibal with the Phoenician ships over to fight the Rhodians before they can join in against the Romans, while he took his larger fleet and attacked the Romans. So this battle, it was a smaller battle, and I don't count this one in our Roman victories. It's the Battle of Eurymedon, or they call it the Battle of the Side. There was about 40 ships on one side, 50 on the other, and the Rhodians, who had a smaller, faster fleet, they met Hannibal's fleet, and Hannibal's wing that he was commanding was doing well, but the other side was getting beat and broken up, and so Hannibal was forced to retreat. And this happened pretty quick, so the Rhodians had time to join the Romans in their battle against Polynices and the Syrians at Meoniasis, and this was a decisive battle. And at Meoniasis, the Romans had 58 large ships and 22 smaller Rhodians to Antiochus' 89 large ships. Now, since the Syrians had a larger force, the commander decided to attack the Romans' left wing, hoping to outflank the Romans because he had more ships, so he was going to try to swing around their flank. So he went at the right, but this meant that his other wing had to hold off the Romans alone until he can swing around. Now, with the Roman boarding tactics and the heavy infantry, it was very tough, and the Syrians weren't doing very well holding off the Romans. But Polynices still figured if he can turn that Roman left, remember he was hitting it on his right, he went out to attack. If he can turn that Roman left before his right gets beat, then he figures he could win. But the Rhodian commander saw this taking place, and he did everything he could to slow the flank maneuver. He got his fast ships, and he would get some of them, and he'd rush them out on the flank to prevent the Syrians from outflanking. And because the Rhodian ships were faster, he did succeed in preventing Polynices from outflanking the Romans long enough, until the Romans on their left side had broken through the Syrians, and then came around and hit the Syrian right, which was trying to outflank the Romans. And then, of course, the Syrians, once again, seeing this happening, they ran. The Syrians lost 42 of 89 ships, just about half of their fleet. And the Romans now were free to cross the Hellespont. So the Battle of Meoniasis was a victory for the Romans. So now they've won 3 major battles against the Syrians. Now, after Antiochus lost these naval battles, Rome was able to cross the Hellespont with King Minos of Paragon help, and they invaded Asia. Now, Lucius Scipio, he was the consul in 190, and he was the younger brother of Scipio Africanus, the more famous brother. So when they set up camp at Paragama, Silicus, Antiochus' son, had besieged it, and they actually captured Lucius, Scipio Africanus' son. But Antiochus returned his son to Scipio. Now, there's some confusion at this point of what happened and what took place, but from the narratives I've read, it seems to me like Antiochus was trying to gain favor from the Romans once again, because he did, when he lost the naval battles, he asked Rome if he could accept Rome's original agreement to leave Greece alone. And Rome said, nope, sorry, at this point we want everything, all your territory east of the Taurus Mountains. So I think capturing Lucius now, I think he was trying to gain favor, and he returned Lucius to the Romans, and just in the hopes that Romans would leave him his kingdom. If he happened to lose this next battle, the surrender terms would go easy on him. But that's my opinion. Now, Scipio Africanus is really the man in charge of this battle. And as Antiochus approaches them, the ancient figures show him with 70,000 to 80,000 men against the Roman 40. But Granges states that the Antiochus probably had about 50,000. The Syrians didn't outnumber the Romans that much, but they did outnumber him in cavalry by 2 to 1. So Scipio had set up his forces in this horseshoe bend of a river to protect himself from being outflanked, or to help himself from being outflanked from the cavalry. And Antiochus didn't attack him at that spot. What Antiochus did was he just backed up and he's going to wait him out. Now Scipio has a choice to, he can either go out and offer battle, or he leaves, moves back across the river, and that wouldn't be good for the morale of the men, because no army wants to run from the enemy, especially Romans. So Scipio decided to offer battle right there, and what he did was he came out of the horseshoe bend a little bit, just where the river on his left went out in a 90 degree, so it kind of opened up the battlefield there. And he set up right there, so he still had the river on his right protecting him, and this was enough for Antiochus. He came up, and the two sides started the battle right there. Scipio, you would think he would have put his cavalry on that left to protect his open flank more, but he didn't. He put King Eumenes and all of his cavalry on the right, where he had the river protecting his flank, and on the left he just put the light infantry. So when the battle started, the skirmishing started, both right wings attacked the other's left, and the Syrians on their right, Antiochus's cavalry was driving the Roman light infantry back, and on Antiochus's left, King Eumenes was driving them back. And when the chariots started retreating, they went into the cavalry formation and disorganized them. And once that got disorganized, they couldn't reform, and King Eumenes, they drove them off the field. Now, the center, the 16,000 strong phalanx, and they had 56 elephants in between their phalanx formations and in front of them, they were hesitant to engage at this point because their wing was gone and the Romans could encircle them. So the light infantry and the Veleti and the legionnaires opposite the phalanx just start throwing their pilum and their arrows, and they start throwing them into the phalanx. And at this crucial point, the Asian elephants, they stampeded and smashed right through the Syrian phalanx. And then the Romans attacked and routed the bigger force. The Syrians, according to ancient sources, lost over half their men. Granges says they lost about 10,000, and the Romans lost 5,000 according to Granges. If you go by ancient sources, it's more like 25,000 Syrians and 300 Romans. But that's what we have. And now Rome received everything in Asia Minor, north and east of Tarsus Mountains in the surrender terms. And Rome gave most of this territory to Pergama and Rhodes. The Romans did not annex or occupy any territory in the east, but they were seen as welcomed as protectors to the smaller kingdoms here. And Rome started moving through Galatia area, fighting the tribes and subduing those tribes there, and the smaller kingdoms appreciated it and they took control. And the main kingdoms were ruling now in the Asian area would be Galatia, Bithynia, Pontus, and Pergama. The Seleucid Empire was now pretty fragile, and they lost a battle to the Egyptians. I think it was the Battle of Raphia. They were pretty fragile at this point. And then a triumph was given to Lucius Scipio because he was the consul on campaign against the Syrians, and because of politics, Cato the Elder disliked Scipio Africanus, and they gave Lucius Scipio the surname Asiatic. And that's because Scipio Africanus had enemies in the Senate because he was so popular. And this pretty much ends Cornelius Scipio Africanus' career. He was 5-0 in major battles. Scipio was regarded as one of history's most brightest and successful commanders. His record reflects his command of battlefield tactics and strategy. Roman generals used his battlefield tactics for years. He was respected by his enemies and loved by his soldiers. The Roman people admired him. Because of the enemies Scipio had in the Senate, which most notably it was Cato the Elder, and they tried to reverse his successes. Now, you know Scipio is best known for defeating Hannibal at Zama. Despite his popularity, the Senate, led by Cato, accused him of taking bribes and payoffs from Antiochus. Now, this may have something to do with when Antiochus captured his son, but we don't know the circumstances surrounding that, and the charges have never been justified. And this pretty much ended his career. And as a side note, when the Senate was looking for somebody to take command of the campaign against Antiochus, even though they picked Lucius in 190 because they couldn't pick Africanus because he was just consul, the Senate wouldn't even have approved his younger brother Lucius to be the consul of 190 and given command of the campaign against Antiochus unless Scipio Africanus agreed to go with them. So that's how little faith the Senate had in Lucius's ability. Scipio Africanus just retired and went off to live in his villa, and he died probably around 183 or 184 BC at the age of 53. You know, he's best known and remembered for defeating Hannibal at Zama. And coincidentally, Hannibal also died in 184. And his actions were actually caused by Flaminius, the consul, in 184, who tried to extradite the aged Hannibal, who was harmless by now, and Hannibal took poison, killed himself, and died in Bithynia. And even the Roman Senate thought this to be cruel and condemned Flaminius' actions. But anyways, at this point, with the Romans winning 4 victories against the Syrians in major battles, their battle record goes to 36-14. Now, usually I would end the video right here. I try to keep it in under 30 minutes, around 30. But I want to finish the conquest of Greece. So I'm going to carry this on a little bit longer, and I'm just going to go over it pretty quick. And what we run into here is from 188, when the Syrian war ended, we go down to 172 when the Third Macedonian War starts, and this puts the Macedonian phalanx against the Roman legionnaires again. I'm going to cover this stuff pretty quick. And what we have here is we have Philip's son of Macedon, Perseus, and he ascends the throne in 179. And in 171, he basically starts the Third Macedonian War. Now, Perseus again tried to dominate all of Greece, and due to Roman incompetence, he was succeeding. Now, Perseus was ravaging the country of Thessaly and occupied the major towns in the northwest. Publius Licinius, he marched out from Ypres and camped. Perseus tried to draw the Romans out by ravaging within a mile of them, but the Romans did not budge. He then tried to draw out the Roman cavalry and attack it with his superior cavalry force, but again to no avail. The next day he withdrew 5 miles, and in the early morning he deployed for battle. The Romans, being surprised he was offering battle, followed suit, and a skirmish broke out that ended in a draw. Then a cavalry battle ensued on the wings and the center, with Greek cavalry fighting the Pergamon cavalry. Now, before the heavy infantry even engaged, the Greeks withdrew. But I give this battle, it's the Battle of Colonicius, to the Greeks. The Romans lose, so they get a loss, just because the fact that the Romans had lost 2,000 men to the Greek 400 men, and they lost 200 cavalry to 20 cavalry of the Greeks. And the Romans did not advance any further from this point. So in that itself, strategically, the Greeks win this battle. But the most important battle comes at the Battle of Pydna in 168. Now, the veteran Aemilius Paulus, he takes charge and he pins down Perseus at Pydna. Now, the Greeks had 40,000 men, including a 20,000 strong phalanx. The Romans had 36,000. The cavalry force of both sides were about equal. Now, the battle opens up and Perseus drove his phalanx right into the Romans. Now, Paulus states that the sight of the phalanx had alarmed him, and I'm sure it put fear into a lot of the soldiers there. Now, the legionnaires were trying to hack off the points of the phalanx, and the Veleti were throwing missiles into the formation and trying to assist the legionnaires in hacking off the points. The phalanx kept driving the legions back. So point one, remember I'm keeping score on the Macedonian phalanx versus the legions, and point one here, victory will go to the phalanx, the Greeks, because formation per formation against each other, the phalanx does push the legions back. They can't handle that type of formation, and so the Greeks will get 1 point for that. Now, the Romans, it is said they even plan to retreat and they back up, and as they back up, they're backing up into uneven and broken ground. Now, when the phalanx started to go over this uneven ground, they started to open up little gaps in their formations due to this rough terrain, and it slowly started to fragment the phalanx. The legionnaires then took advantage and cut into the gaps with the sword and cut the phalanx down. Now this is point two. Point two once again goes to the Romans, because if the phalanx does not stay together and the Roman legionnaires can get in close and in between them, then the phalanx becomes vulnerable and the master swordsmanship of the Romans wins. So point two goes to the Romans on this one. Now, Paulus, he had 22 elephants that the Greeks had with them on the Roman side, and the elephants had cut into the Greek left, which were then routed. And Perseus, who commanded the majority of the companion cavalry, seeing this, he fled, with his cavalry never engaging in the battle. Now, he's condemned by his soldiers after this as being a coward. But some reports now state, and I believe Granger's states, that Perseus was wounded early in the battle and he was not on the field, which may lead to the fact that is why his cavalry left the field when they saw that the elephants were routing the wing and the phalanx was falling apart. But we're not 100% sure on that. But because the cavalry left the field, the phalanx was getting surrounded and basically most armies run. Now, there are some reports that some 8,000 of these 20,000 phalangists, they never even engaged in the battle, and that's how fast an undisciplined army will disintegrate. This battle is considered by historians mostly lost by the Greeks due to their poor command. It is what it is, but yet again the Roman legionnaire defeats the Macedonian phalanx. If we add up our points, I was keeping track, remember, it was 4-0 so far in favor of the Romans. And these 2 points I made here went 1-1, so really the Romans end up with 5 victory points to the Greeks 1. So in all, the Roman legionnaire, the manipular system, was just better overall as a fighting force than a Greek phalanx was. That's my opinion on it. Now, this battle only lasted a little more than an hour, but the pursuit lasted all night. Only 100 Romans were killed to about 20,000 Greeks, and 11,000 Greeks were taken prisoner. Macedonia was divided into 4 republics. The empire forged by Philip II and Alexander the Great was at its end. Rome dismantled Macedonia, and then they went into Ypres and they sacked over 70 cities there because they aided Perseus. Now, many of the Greek population suffered and were killed in this. Now, it took a few more years, but Rome controlled most of northern Greece, and they left the southern part again to the Achaean League. Now, one more point on the legion and the phalanx. The Macedonian phalanx was not the same as the mobile phalanx of Alexander's time. With the growing tendency toward heavier weapons and armor, the present phalanx had reverted back to a more rigid type style of fighting. At Cynoscephaly, the phalanx attacked by Flaminius's tribune in the rear was unable to wheel about and protect itself, while at Goglamea, Alexander's phalanx wheeled about and engaged the Persians when they broke through and tried to attack the Macedonian baggage train. The legion constantly developed in the direction of flexibility. The greatness of Scipio Africanus gave great impetus, and the commanders in the eastern wars absorbed his tactics. As to the question of the effectiveness of the sword or pike, at Pydna, Paulus divided his force into small units with orders to exploit the gaps in the phalanx, and thus the Roman shield and sword made quick work of the phalangists, which had swords and small shields, but they were not trained like the Romans were in using them. The phalanx was impregnable while it remained stationary, but once it was forced to move, it became more vulnerable. Remember, the score in the other battle was 4-0 the Romans. In this one, it was 1-1. So the final score ends up to be 5-1 in the Roman favors. And that's just the way I see it. The Roman manipular formation was just better overall than the Greek formation. Now, that was Chapter 2, the Third Macedonian War. Now, in Chapter 3, we have the third and final Illyrian War of 168. And again, there was no major battles in this war. There was a lot of maneuvering. Livy's text of the campaign is missing, but it was a 30-day campaign, and the Illyrian king Gentius allied with the Macedonians, remember, who were in their Third Macedonian War, and who had built a fleet of 270 lembi, which are light, smaller ships. And they asked Rhodes if they wanted to join forces. King Gentius focused on Rome's territory in the Illyria area. Rome landed a force twice the size of the king's 15,000 force. The Romans had approached Scroda, a well-fortified city, in battle formation. Gentius held out for 3 days, hoping reinforcements would come, but they never did, and he ended up surrendering to the Romans. The Romans then marched north to capture his queen, Queen Ituta, and the heads of the Illyrian family, and arrested them. They sacked most of the cities and looted them. The Adriatic state was in Roman control, although it took about another 40 years to really bring the state in the Roman realm and subdue the Dalmatian people. Now, what finishes off the Greeks is Chapter 4. This is the fourth and final Macedonian War. It goes from 150 to 146. There's only one major engagement in this, and the Romans win it. It's the Battle of Corinth of 146. It's the Achaean League. Remember, they were left in charge in southern Greece, and they were trying to dominate the rest of the Peloponnesian area. They were the last independent power, and they came into hostilities with Sparta in the Peloponnesian area, which was a Roman ally. Rome intervened, and they started a systematic conquest of the Peloponnesus. The Achaeans were helpless and could not prevent it. The Roman general Lucius Mummius captured the key city of Corinth, and the inhabitants were slaughtered, and the city was sacked. Rome was now in control of all of Greece. And these are some pictures I took of the ancient ruins of Corinth. And this image right here is the Roman agora, area. It's the business center or marketplace of the Romans. Now, we had 3 more major battles to the Roman record. Against Perseus, remember Perseus won one, and the Romans won the Battle of Pydna, so there's 1 victory and 1 loss added. And then the final Macedonian War, the destruction of Corinth, is another Roman victory, so they go up another win. The third and final Illyrian War brought no major battle. So at the end here, we're looking at the Roman map, 168. Remember, after the Third Macedonian War, this is what they controlled. And then they fought the Third and final Illyrian War in 168 to 167, and they took over the Illyria here. And then they have the fourth and final Macedonian War from 150 to 146, and they take all of Greece. And we're going to end the video here. So the Romans own all this territory, plus they're a protectorate over Pergama in Asia and over Egypt. So they are on their way to empire. Now we got to continue the wars of conquest in the next video with the Lusitania War and the final Punic War.